my grandniece had must have been in like 4th grade or something, and she had an assignment where she had to do a cartoon. And she was having problems, and it's like, you're having problems with that? That's the easiest thing in the world, I told her. And so I did a cartoon like off the top of my head, and that sort of made me realize how easy and fun I thought it was. So I did want to start doing more cartoons myself. I'm not quite sure where I came up with the cookbook idea, but I think it was just my background. So I moved to New York in '76, and my idea there was to be an artist and a writer. But it's not that easy. So to get back into art, I decided to do this cartoon project, which I thought would be a lot of fun. So I'm not quite sure what year I started, maybe in like the 80 something, 87, 86, 88. So to get back into art, because I felt really disconnected from doing my art. And it was also just to come to terms with things in my childhood and come to terms with my heritage as a Latvian. My grandmother lived with us, and I think a lot of Latvians had this. The grandmother was the cook. So she would make traditional Latvian fare. She would make, this kaposti and the kotletes and the frikadeļu zupa and, very basic Latvian food. My father would make the rasols. That was what he would do. He'd do the rasols, and he'd also do the marinated pumpkins and gurči too. Although sometimes my grandmother, it seemed like they did the gurči together.
And what about your mum?
She hates to cook. My father's last words to me were, and this is in Latvian, "Tev mamma nemāk, tev mamma nav labs pavērs," which translates in, your mother is not a good cook. Well, I didn't really like a lot of Latvian food when I was young. And actually, I think it started even younger than my teenage years. And my parents would always force us to eat the food. So when you're forced to eat the food, you're not going to like it that well. And a lot of it is quite greasy,
But you've come back to Latvian food.
Right. Oh, now I love it. Yeah. No, it's, well, at one point, I couldn't eat potatoes because at one point my father had made me sit at the table till midnight or whatever it was until I ate my potatoes. But I got over that, and no, I love some Latvian dishes. I'm still not that fond of all of them, but I'm not quite sure. But I mean, now it's more of a there's a nostalgic element. There's a change in taste as you grow older, and some of the recipes, like the gray peas, I found a better way of eating them that's still very Latvian.
And how was that?
Yeah, because originally my parents just boiled them, and they're real bland, and we had to eat them, and it's like my mother thought they were such a treat. She was just loving them, and it's like, what? I couldn't understand that because I thought they were bland. But since then, I found out that you can make them with, you chop up onion, bacon, and then you mix and heat up with the peas and serve with sour cream, and they're really delicious. Maybe a little, salt, and pepper, a little spicy too. but it did come out in 1992, which was just 1 year after, Latvia got its independence. And it wasn't well received. I was told that, how can I make fun of the Latvians? They've already suffered enough. And, most of it I don't think I make fun of. There's a few, well, maybe. But there's a few that are more critical of them, like drinking the alcohol, the excess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe the ice cubes too, that they would put herring heads in little ice cubes. Yeah, but I would say about 95% of the recipes are real. There's a few, and I guess you have to figure out which ones are real and which ones are the joke yourself. And I've gone through and reproduced the recipes in my kitchen. And some of them are really good, and some of them maybe not as good, but it's a matter of taste.
So, for example, the yeast recipe, the comfort food where you just eat yeast, that's a real recipe, or is that a joke?
That's a real recipe. My parents and my mother, actually, my mother and my grandmother would feed it to us. But back in those days, right now you get the yeast and the dry yeast in the little packets and mixed with water. But back then, they had these little cubes of yeast. I haven't seen them for years and years of years, but you could buy cubes of yeast, and then you'd use a fork, you'd crumble them up, add sugar and a little water, and it'd start bubbling, and then you would eat them both sort of as a treat, but also I think they were supposed to have some kind of health benefit too, according to my mother and grandmother. My father wasn't involved in that one.
And one of the favorite quotes from the book, or the funny quotes I thought, was about the pumpkin, the pumpkin, marinated pumpkin, that at the end you feed it to friends and watch them spit it out.
Right. Well, that's real. But it's that recipe might be the one that you might not like that well, because I don't know if it's exactly accurate. I got it from my father, and he wouldn't give me like specifics. He'd just say, you put in a little of this, a little of that, and a little of that. So I tried it, and I probably put in a lot of this and a lot of that and a lot of that, and it didn't come out nearly as good. But I would like to try it again. And there is, there's a little room for wiggle room within these recipes. You don't have to, but there is in all recipes, you don't have to follow them to the letter. Especially the ones that aren't baking. Baking, you probably want to follow more closely.
So who taught you to cook? Was it your father mainly, or your grandmother, or?
Well, I think it was being a hippie. Because back in, I guess that would have been the late 60s, I actually moved. Well, I didn't move. I spent time in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. I had a friend who's Latvian, Pārsla Bērziņš, and Bērziņš, Pārsla Bērziņš. And we would like cook together, and it was often like, oh, she invited all these people on the street. So I had to figure out how to stretch what we were cooking to feed like 10 people instead of 2. So I think I had thought back over those years, and I didn't want to think they were quite wasted, because I think now they weren't, because I actually sort of learned how to improvise with my cooking. I knew a little cooking before, but this sort of was the test. I always wondered, where he picked it up, because instead of ham, he uses Spam from a can. So it must have been, in the DP camps, I think, because that was the only meat you got the Spam. And he'd actually make it work. He would chop it up really small, the Spam, so you weren't really getting, it tasted better somehow. He'd use potato. He'd also add a little silce, herring, and then he would add horseradish, marote, right? Yeah, marote. And he'd make his own. He'd grate them and mix it with the vinegar. And he also made his own mustard. Well, my father and my great uncle, who lives in Chicago, they would always, they would figure out new things to do. And one time they figured out they were going to mix 7-Up with alcohol, both from the north of Europe, and I think it was from Lapland, some kind of whatever it was, I don't remember, and also something from Turkey. Actually, now I'm remembering Turkey was the southern one. And so they got that together, and I'm not remembering which one was the one that had a chemical reaction. Because they put in a little bit of the alcohol in one and the other, and one was just a little, just like vodka, a little bubbly. But the other one had a reaction, and it came out of the glass. And then I think they decided that vodka was the choice.
And you mentioned
specific to me was the National Skunk Day, Latvian National Skunk Day. And that again was due to my father and my great uncle, who when we visited, they would go to Lincoln Park Zoo to look at what they called the raccoons, but I think they were skunks. And somehow I think I must have told my friends about this, and they would tease me about it. And and that's how it got into the book.
A recipe about how to cook it.
And you can't really do one. That's one of the 5% that's not a real recipe.
Don't try it at home. And so what is your favorite food today?
Sushi. But my favorite Latvian food? As I said, I love the gray peas that I've rediscovered. This new way of making them that actually gives them flavor. And I was also taking art classes when I was doing this. So there's like the regular sorrel recipe, and then and this is the recipe before art classes. So I did. Where is it? The next page is another one after art classes where I have this is the negative space. This is an abstract. This is your nude. And this is, I can't remember what this was. Oh, the contour drawing where you draw it without looking at it. But since we're speaking of that, can I talk about
your co-author?
My co-author, which is my niece's daughter. But that's a real recipe too. Oh yeah. I had been working on the pidage one, I believe it was Thanksgiving, and I left it out I was at my sister's and my grandniece was there, so I left it out, took a break, and she actually filled it in with her own character. So at first I was a bit annoyed, but then I started laughing because it was so funny. So then I gave her a whole recipe at the end, which is not a Latvian recipe. she did the apple pie one, which is great.
It is a good one. I really liked it.
Uh-huh.
I think it fits the style of the rest of the book in a way.
In a way, it does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.